Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out this morning. My name is Kimberly Bradley. I'm the Conversations Curator here at Art Basel in Basel. The panel this morning will take a look at cultural translation with the Japanese art scene and other scenes inside and outside of it. It promises to be very interesting. We're very honored to have on stage with us, to the furthest from me, artist Ming Wong, Berlin-based. In the center is, thank you. In the center is Yuko Mohri. It was a wonderful pavilion, Japanese pavilion in Venice this year. And moderating this morning is Andrew Maerkle, writer, editor, editorial director of Art Week Tokyo, man of many other talents. This panel is presented in collaboration with Art Week Tokyo, and there will be time. I keep saying time and space. There is time and space for questions at the end of the hour, and enjoy the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. As Kimberly said, this talk is organized in collaboration, or as a collaboration between Art Basel and Art Week Tokyo. And I'll just say a word about Art Week Tokyo before we get into the topic. Art Week Tokyo was founded in 2021 as a citywide initiative for activating the local art ecosystem in Tokyo. It's organized in collaboration with Art Basel and connects 50 of the city's leading museums, galleries, and art spaces through coordinated programming and special platforms. And so today's talk is part of a series of activations that we've been doing in cities, starting with Art Basel, Hong Kong in March, to extend Art Week Tokyo's programming to other cities and deepen the collaboration between Art Week Tokyo and Art Basel. So it's a great honor to be here today with Yuko and Ming. I'll just also introduce some elements of their practices that I think are relevant to the talk. First of all, Yuko's work is currently on view in the Japan Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, where it's been met with widespread acclaim. She's also exhibited in international exhibitions around the world, including in Gwangju, Sydney, Sao Paulo, and Lyon. And she's currently preparing a solo exhibition for the Artisan Museum in Tokyo, which opens November 1 and will be on view during Art Week Tokyo later this year in November. She also has an upcoming exhibition at Hangar Bicocca in Milan in 2025. Ming Wong is based in Berlin. He represented Singapore at the 53rd Venice Biennale in 2009, where his Life of Imitation received a special mention award. Ming's work was recently on view in the Biennale of Sydney, which just closed, as well as in Signals, How Video Changed the World at the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 2023, and Wayang Spaceship, which was commissioned by the Singapore Art Museum in 2022. Ming has exhibited and produced projects extensively in Japan over the course of his career. There's actually too many to name, but I'll just mention the solo exhibitions, Hara Museum of Contemporary Art in 2011, Shiseido Gallery in 2013. He made a project that then came to Basel Art Unlimited the following year. A very special project for the curatorial space Asakusa in 2019, and a solo exhibition at Ota Fine Arts in 2023. So I think we have a lot of different angles to address the topic of cultural translation and artistic practices. For me, one of the fascinating things in thinking about art in Japan is the way that art in Japan has been informed by so many different cultures. Obviously, the Western avant-garde or modern art has been one of the major factors in the development of Japanese art since the late 19th century onward. On the other hand, Japanese art and culture have also been an incredible toolbox for artists around the world, starting from the role of ukiyo-e in the development of Impressionism, all the way to the influence of anime on global pop culture and different forms of media culture. So there are these two different vectors of cultural exchange that are taking place through Japan, and I think looking at the case of Japan helps us to also deconstruct a bit some of the myths that we have about cultural essentialism, about national identity. And I think both of your work, in different ways, actually show us how our identities or our built environments are not just constructs, but actually assemblages of different materials and signifiers that we kind of patch together through various creative processes. And I think that has a lot to say about issues of cultural translation and how we can approach cultural translation with an open mind, rather than through the values of sort of more dogmatic values of cultural authenticity or issues of original and copy. But to get started, I think since both of you have the experience of representing your country in the Venice Biennale, maybe we could talk a bit about what goes into preparing an exhibition for a site like Venice and the different processes of cultural translation that inform being a national representative. Yuko, do you want to start us off?
Thank you for this time. I'm really honored to talk about my project with in here. So about the Venice Biennial, it's just open like April, and I just came from Venice yesterday because my family wanted to see it. So talking about National Pavilion, so to be honest, I still kind of doubting what is a nationality so far, and then because I don't think about what is a Japanese, what is like for example Tokyo, the art seriously, but this like a couple of years I kind of back to look my how to say environment, what my how to say background. That is more, how to say, easy to think about my roots. And then, so Japan Pavilion, I kind of did like a studio program. And then, as you know, the Japan Pavilion looks very complicated. It's not like a regular gallery space. It has a white wall, but it has a very characteristic floor. So I concerned about how to collaborate with the architecture. And then I just decided simply stay longer. Like I spent 2 months in the space, and I did like a regular studio program. I collected the material in Venice and then to go there every day and then to build the installation. That is like I did in Tokyo every day. So I think also talking about when I got the opportunity in Venice, of course, when I started to think about what I can do is maybe I could use water because I use water all the time in my former project. And of course, Venice has a water issue currently. And then, but life in Venice is slightly like a different between Japan, of course. But we have also water issue in Japan. But it's completely like a different relationship. The people have a life with water. That was really interesting to me. And then I kind of improvise how to build the installation locally with the material in Venice. That is I do. I will talk about what's my environment in Tokyo later.
Yeah. But you also made I don't know how it works specifically, but you made the choice of working with a non-Japanese curator as well, right? So was that your choice, and was that just something that developed naturally, or
You mean
your pavilion curator Sukyoung?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So why I work with Sukyeon, I visited Venice as a visitor a couple of times. Always I kind of felt, I really enjoyed the old pavilions program, but also on the other hand, Japan Pavilion always represented the only Japanese curator and a Japanese artist. Sometimes like some Korean artists too, but most of the time we just present Japanese artists. And then, but on the other hand, other pavilions kind of naturally collaborate with other nationalities, which is kind of more natural, right? And I kind of had desire to something new. And then later, before the Venice announcement, I participated in Gwangju Biennial and worked with Sukyeong Lee. And then I knew her quite a long time because she curated Namjoon Pike, the show in Tate. That was amazing to me. And then in the Sukyeon, also Gwangju Biennial, she our theme is water too. And then she mentioned about, how difficult to explain about, like, for example, East philosophy in the Western culture. It's like a very, how to say, she based in London quite a long time, over 20 years. But she still say that. And I kind of interested about how developed together, and then I wanted to conversation with her more, and then I invited her with long letter, and then she accepted. That was really, I'm really happy to work with her.
Thank you. Ming, do you want to add to the?
Good morning. Thank you for coming. I sit here humbly with you guys because I also was at the opening week of the Venice Biennale, and I loved Yuko Mori's pavilion so much. It was such a breath of fresh air in the whole scheme of things. So thank you for that. And now here I am sharing a stage with you, talking about Singapore Pavilion in 2009. This is a long time ago. I feel like Mama, Mama-san. So today I'm Mama-san. Talk about Singapore Pavilion that I did in 2009 with the curator Tang Fu Quen. And what we did was actually a lot about thinking about what it means about a national pavilion. We talked a lot about what it means to be from Singapore. It was really about identity, thinking about that. And what we did was we decided to use the pavilion as a showcase to talk about the cinema legacy that was present in Singapore, that pulled together influences from Europe, from America, from Japan, India, etc., a kind of multicultural hodgepodge of artistic expression through cinema. And my work really has been for a long time about reenacting like iconic scenes from world cinema. And with the National Pavilion in Singapore, we basically showed where I came from, why I'm interested in language, why I'm interested in being like a crow and picking up from different histories and culture and trying to make that into something of my own. So this was the gist of the thematic. We didn't have a beautiful white cube pavilion. We had, in one of the pictures you'll see, a very Baroque, like a full-on Italian palazzo where you can't put a nail in the wall or anything. So we decided to use it, there you go. We turned it into a kind of Baroque cinema with cinema billboards, and then when you go through, there's a whole archive of materials relating to the multicultural aspect of Singapore's cinematic history, and my installations, my reenactments of cinema from Singapore, from Hollywood, and from Hong Kong, a Wong Kar-wai piece. And that really kind of, I guess, introduced to the world the idea of what Singapore was in terms of language, in terms of identity and performativity. And it really changed my life. as I'm sure this year's pavilion, Venice Biennale, would change yours. Yuko, Mama-san says. One of the things that happily happened as a result of that was my meeting with Japanese curators, and a year subsequently, we managed to bring the show from Venice to Hara Museum, and I also embarked on research into Japanese cinema, which then led to further projects at the Shiseido Gallery, and even later on at Asakusa.
Yeah, could you tell us about, I think it's pretty unique that you've returned to Japan over the years and you've continued to build a dialogue with Japanese cinema as a topic, but as well as the Japanese art scene, different Japanese curators. You've worked in a range of spaces from a sort of corporately sponsored gallery with a bigger production budget to a small curatorial collective in a tiny space. So,
yeah, let's summarize this. So, 2009, 2010, also it's just over a decade that I started really engaging with showing in Asia again. I mean, I was born and I grew up in Singapore, but I lived in London, I studied in London, and then I moved to Berlin. And really, it was after Venice that I really started to show again in Asia in a big way, so in Japan certainly, but also in Hong Kong, Singapore, etc. And I guess looking back through the research, both in Japan and also into Asian cinema, Hong Kong cinema, I begin to mark out the cross-national influences. You know, Japan was such a big influence in terms of media, popular culture, and also just like in the relations of Asia and the so-called West. I think that continues into popular culture forms. I mean, I grew up also consuming Japanese culture on radio, TV, in the cinema. So out of that, I presented, let's say, these two projects. Shiseido Gallery, which happened in 2013. In fact, that project came to Unlimited in 2014, called Me in Me, where I reenacted a mixture of different films from classic Japanese cinema, those that we are quite familiar with, which I kind of categorize in three time zones. So there is the classical, like the Mizoguchi style of period dramas. There's the modern, which is the post-war, the rapid change in Japanese society as shown by Ozu and Naruse. And then the third space is anime, looking at the future. And what I did was I picked all these strong women characters in Japanese cinema because they're mainly male directors, let's face it, at the time. I looked for the strong female characters and kind of created a kind of sisterhood over space, time, and gender. The thing which I brought on, which is actually a study in nuance, was that I'm not Japanese. Spoiler alert, I'm not Japanese. I don't speak Japanese, but in doing the project, I had to get a second camera to show the behind the scenes, the making of, the gaps in trying to speak, act, look like a Japanese female, like a mama-san in this case, and which is not apparent, I guess, to outsiders. As opposed to other works when I'm reenacting Fassbinder or Pasolini, it's obvious that this is an Asian copycat, right? It's a kind of easy way to look at it. But when you look at the Japanese works, it's a little bit more subtle. There's a lot of history, I think, also embedded in a kind of desire of becoming. So that was Shiseido. And then a few years later, because part of the research opened up this fascinating window into Japanese pornography, which I love, especially the 70s roman porno scene, which is when cinema had a crisis. And in order to survive, the big film studios decided they had to make pornography, right? Same film workers, they decided to make soft porn, beautiful soft porn, but also there's another wave of the ninkatsu, really kind of like what do you call it, low budget, kind of more punk soft porn in the 70s. And these I found fascinating and a kind of counterpoint to the polite world cinema beautifully curated by the West into, no, we go into the underbelly. And again, looking at these soft porn cinema, I also had to look for strong women characters, not just mere objects of desire. Because of course, again, it's all male directors targeted at a male audience. Whereas there are these strong female characters that emerge who are aware of their place in society, trying to forge out a stronger identity, using gender, sexuality as part of their weapons. And hence, I made a kind of very low-budget reenactments of, I think, 3 key films, which was presented in an old Japanese house where Asakusa had the gallery. And so the difference, instead of a beautiful white cube video presentation, it was like entering a house of a former soft porn actress who's alone in a house, retired, and decides to go on social media to revive her glory days, right? So I impersonated this ex-porno actress. And you could go into the house, you see the old costumes, you see this poor old, getting older actress trying to reclaim her glory days, and you see lots of little clips. It's all shot on an iPhone. And there's plenty of little phones, like almost 30 phones dotted around the house. And it's all these little reenactments when I try to kind of infiltrate the Japanese soft porn cinema. It's so embarrassing to talk about this in public. I haven't really shown it outside of Japan, but there you go.
Yeah, but I mean, the Japanese Roman porno was also an incredible, cultural product that integrated radical politics and really different social positions into the fabric of pornography,
And also some of the friends who making a film, and then they kind of always struggling to making money. So, but the only porn, they could do many experimentation, and then some many they did kind of the porn film is like one of the space to do something like a new or like experimentation, which is interesting.
Right. I actually want to jump ahead because, since we're talking about gender, Yuko, over the past several years, I'm not sure how much people are aware of it, but you've been working on the theme of, you've been integrating elements of Marcel Duchamp's practice into your own practice. So your More More series of assemblages use water to create kinetic situations, and they're installed in frames that recall the scale and appearance of Marcel Duchamp's large glass, which is, of course, a work that is on view in Philadelphia, but also has copies in London, Sweden, and Tokyo. And this work actually is it's maybe the template for the next Japanese Roman porno film, because it's got this mythical bride figure and these 9 bachelors who are all hot to get in bed with her. And you've made also an installation that recreated the large glass in 3 dimensions. And you're kind of going into it and reworking it in a way that maybe is, while not outwardly critical of the gender scenario in Duchamp's work, it's kind of maybe exercising the gender issues.
Yeah, so that actually this photograph, I did installation making 3-dimensional like a large glass. I refer the Duchamp's large glass, but to making the installation to investigate all parts of the large glass, if I created some installation in a 3-dimensional way. So talking about Marcel Duchamp, I mean, be honest, I knew him since like I was a teenager, because he obviously appeared in a textbook in high school. But in that time, I had no idea about contemporary art. Especially my hometown didn't have a contemporary art museum, but only the modern art museum, which is actually Shibusawa Tatsuhiko how to say, live in my neighborhood. And he's one of the very important person, surrealism. He kind of, how to say, there are that modern museum has many collection about surrealism, but no contemporary art. So in that case, I could see some chance, like modern art, like included Marcel Duchamp. Also like some practices document over there, like a John Cage. But in that time, also, I still didn't know what is contemporary. I mean, when I encountered the art practice, I kind of understood as a more like a performance or like a musicians or like a more, how to say, some joke or something. It's like a no border between like a pop culture. I mean, in that time, I digging by now. Also, I kind of went to concert all the time. And I just naturally curious about some like crazy people who exist in the past. And then we talked about also the Takiguchi Shuzo Takiguchi, he's an artist, Japanese artist and also critic. And then he kind of had a relationship with Marcel Duchamp a little bit. That's why in Japan, we have some collection about Marcel Duchamp. It's like it's far away from Europe and also New York, but because of that relationship, we could touch some collection about Marcel Duchamp. So in that time, I also didn't think about deeply about gender, but it's like a, you know, as I say, it's like a joke. And then and after that, almost 10 years ago, when I start the practice as a contemporary artist, I had a chance to visit the Philadelphia Museum. And then it's first time to see his practice in the museum. And then I saw, I was a little nervous. I saw the Japanese large glass, Japanese version, which is very beautifully well done, created by Takiguchi Shuzo. And then it looks like a very contemporary art way. But when I visited Philadelphia, actually the real large glass is like a very much handmade. And also I felt this is kind of, at first I was quite, how to say, nervous to see the real one. But right after, I immediately felt very familiar. You know, it's like a similar practice like me, you know, using everyday object. So what I want to say is I really, of course, interested about his philosophy, but on the other hand, I'm interested about his way to grow up his thinking with materials. And then so I kind of trying to do using the everyday object, following his way. And then also the large glass is talking about the circulation system of the desire between bachelor and the bride. But I'm much more interested about this energy, invisible energy between some force between like two sections. So in the installation, I kind of making like a kinetic installation using electricity and also fan, the wind from the fan, and then to make some joke in the installation. So in Japan, we have many Duchampian, mostly is male, talking about like gender or like women. But I think my way is much more like, how to say, approach using the object and then develop some practice with thinking.
Right. But you have an extraordinary piece which was just on view, or it's on view in the circulation, where you also worked with there's an edition, a special edition of Marcel Duchamp's Boîte en Valise in the Museum of Modern Art in Toyama. And maybe you could talk about that as well.
So when I show the piece in Kyoto, Modern Museum of Kyoto, I offer to borrow the artwork, the special edition by Marcel Duchamp, included the one unique piece. It's actually drawing with his sperm. And then when I heard about this story, I was super surprised because why does such a private, how to say, elements it exist in a far east in the world, in Asia. And then also immediately, I kind of imagine, there are many artists who influenced about him, but that the sperm, actual sperm, it's existed in Japan. So I kind of wanted to use the parts in the installation. It's like kind of iconic. The way that we are kind of old son or daughter of him, who knows our sperm is in the future. But anyway, and on the other hand, I kind of interested about the story why he using sperm as a unique piece. So actually, that edition is gifted to Maria Martins, which is his lover. Long time ago, and then he gave it to her, but somehow that edition came to Japan. So right after that, I found that edition. I got actually opportunity to participate São Paulo Biennial, which is Maria Martins organized to the 60s, and then so I really wanted to bring that edition back to Brazil as a piece, but it was not realized because of COVID-19.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I just say something about this? Because we had a great conversation last night about it. When you told me about this story about Duchamp and his Brazilian lover, like Maria Martins, who was one of the founders of the São Paulo Biennial, right? And you wanted to have this idea of kind of continuing the love story. They broke up, they had a tempestuous affair, it was hard to communicate across oceans, etc. And you wanted to bring the Duchamp's sperm that was in Japan, that of course it has to be in Japan, right? And then back to Brazil, to kind of continue this conversation. And I love this idea as a poetic gesture, especially since it's embodied in you as a female, contemporary female from Japan doing this action. I thought that was such a beautiful poetic gesture. I do hope that it will happen. Please.
I negotiated, but they say that was, when I used in Kyoto, that was last time to how to bring to outside of the museum.
They won't let you bring it. Then we will make a new one.
I need some company to make a drawing with sperm, maybe.
Yeah. But I think one of the interesting things about these histories is the way that they're so convoluted sometimes, and one of the other influences that you cite in your practice, Yuko, is John Cage, through John Cage, we could look at this history of how Zen is transmitted around the world. It, starting with the development of Buddhism in India, it gets taken to China, where it becomes, in the encounter with Taoism, it turns into Chan philosophy, and then Chan philosophy gets taken to Japan, where it becomes Zen philosophy, and then Zen philosophy becomes part of the counterculture in US and Europe, and John Cage then brings Zen back to Japan and Japanese art as part of his notion of avant-garde music and chance operations. And I think that's something that, both of you are sort of tracking in your projects. Do you want to?
Yeah, I just mentioned about my background. I encountered the music than the contemporary art when I was really interested about the expression. So the musician, performing arts, it's like more closer, and also cinema too. It's like my hometown even didn't have a contemporary museum, but we had many private cinema plays. They had a great program about not like how to say the famous one, not only the famous one. There are many avant-garde, also experimental the movies. That is, we could touch what the people who express about the expression in the avant-garde way. That is kind of, how to say, very effective to me. And then my practice, I say I did improvisation in the space, which is actually I learned from performing arts or like a musician who did improvisation on the stage. And then that type of the people, they don't have any proper opportunity in the museum. They kind of doing the practice, whatever they want. I mean, it's happened in a venue, concert venue, or like a restaurant space, or some like a very unique space. It's actually, Japanese art history. It's happened not only as a museum. That like a Gutai, they did many practice outside or like a public space. It's like we didn't really necessary to have a museum or something. We kind of did many experimental expression anywhere. So I kind of influenced that, how to say, practice. That's why like a characteristic space like a Japan pavilion, it makes me some trigger what I can do. And then it's like in the improvisation way. So I mean, that's, how to say, the background to look to about like a cinema, like a pop culture, also music. It's really pretty much affect a lot.
And Ming, you could maybe talk about your Rhapsody in Yellow.
Yes, I mean, so let me start from the beginning. So same like you, I didn't grow up with art history and going to museums in Singapore. My first contact with art was really through cinema, world cinema, where we watched everything, listened everything from BBC World Service to American sitcoms, Japanese movies, made in Singapore, Malay movies, Bollywood, etc., that we would imbibe, constantly. That's the making up of my own identity from Singapore. And later, when I went to art school in Singapore, the first art school I went to in Singapore, Nanyang Academy, I decided to do Chinese art, traditional Chinese painting, calligraphy, seal carving, art history, aesthetics, the whole works. Even though my level of Mandarin was actually quite low, I went to English-speaking school in Singapore, but I deep dived into looking back at my so-called ethnic heritage, right? And call it Zen, call it Buddhism or whatever, but how that journey went into the visual arts was kind of important to me as a young artist growing up. And fast forward till this year when I went into your pavilion, somehow one of the things in my brain that clicked was that let's look at this like a landscape painting, the voids, the emptiness, the asymmetries, the sound, and then it becomes performative. And so, I attribute that to this part of my education. I also, as a teenager, played the piano. Classical music as a typical Asian youth forced to learn piano, and of course John Cage was a wonderful influence, right? It kind of undid all that learning the scales and all that kind of systematic learning. I loved the introduction of opening up of this way of thinking in a kind of roundabout way through John Cage and coming back to me as a teenager in Singapore. And I link that now to my most recent project, which is the double piano concerto thing you see there. That's Rhapsody in Yellow, which has been touring Austria, Germany, and Asia, coming up soon. Rhapsody in Yellow started as a John Cagean experiment. I was trying, because I was looking at 50 years of diplomatic relationship between America and China, right? The two great superpowers. About 50 years ago, 1972, when Nixon went and shook hands with Chairman Mao. I'm like, wow, this is a kind of a good time to think back of how far we have come from that moment of engagement, of openness, of the communication. I decided to look through the lens of soft power, and one of them is music, right? Classical music diplomacy, where orchestras from one side would go to the other country. So Western classical music went to China in the 60s, and then they also sent, I think, like classical musicians and acrobats to America. But what I did was I picked the two classical music anthems of China and America from the 20th century as the country has its rise. So from America, so not Duchamp and the famous piece, but I picked Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue, 1924, composed as the country was on its rise. Rhapsody in Blue as a symbol of America. And from China, I picked the Yellow River Concerto, developed during the Cultural Revolution, based on an earlier anti-war piece from the 40s. Also used now as a kind of a cultural symbol of China. Lang would play it at the Olympics in Beijing, right? And they're both like piano concertos in a way, based on Western classical music, but with American touch, with jazz, or with Chinese folk songs influence, but tied together with European Western classical music, and about the same length. So I decided in a John Cage way, let's play them at the same time. Let's see what chance will bring us, will show us when we play both Rhapsody in Blue and Yellow River Concerto together. And I expected like chaos, like sound of like, but instead you had these wonderful moments of synchronicity, of unexpected harmonies. Of course, you had the chaos, but it was like a conversation. And so from there, I made a video piece where I looked for films, media, moving image media that use these two pieces of music. I did research into the histories, and eventually now, I have two pianists doing a piano battle with Rhapsody in Blue and Yellow River Concerto. And above them, a big screen that shows all the media that were collected about the two pieces of music being used as a symbol in the Olympic Games, etc. But also archival footage of Mao and Nixon's historic meeting as a live piano battle. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I think that also shows ways that the processes of cultural translation can sort of come back to shared roots, but they can also show us sort of how the different elements of power that are also informing these processes of cultural transmission. And so obviously, colonialism was a big role in spreading modern art across the world, and our current situation is also informed by global politics, geopolitics, and economics. But Yuko, actually, some of your works are very sensitive readings of those sort of, as you say, invisible forces that shape our environments. And so one piece that I'm thinking of is the one you made for Sapporo International Art Festival in 2014. What's called Circuit in the Ground, or Circus in the Ground, yeah. Where you looked at the history of Japanese colonization in Hokkaido against the sort of indigenous Ainu topology. Could you talk about how you...
Circus in the Ground is actually up here on the slide. It's happened 2014. So it's also like a similar practice. I spent there over months, and then I also collected materials and then to making an installation with site. And also same time I learned about like the history of the indigenous people I knew, also language, which is really related to the sound actually. And then also is geographically it's affected the indigenous life. That is very interested to me. And then that's type of the small narratives, it's kind of very important elements, but it's not strongly appear in the installation. It's like all like everything is like behind the story, but I try to put all like details in the corner of the installation. That is kind of my way. But when I talking about like invisible force, like energy or elements, which is very unstable. So currently, I really feel I'm curious about these unstable elements. Probably, I just thought in this conversation, I thought, for example, my background, we didn't have any strong like art history in Japan or in Asia, but we have many different type of the narratives, also like a different type of the culture. It's like all like affect to us, and then it's really affected our identity as artists. So for me, it's like all like the how to say my practice. It's not have a how to say related again like unstable the elements. That's my core to build the artwork.
Right, and you're also using elements from the environment as integrating it into the composition of the work as a score almost. So one of your famous works, I.O., has a piece of paper or a sheet of paper that is picking up dust from the environment, and then that is in turn controlling these objects that almost act like possessed with, ghosts that are moving suddenly as people are looking through the space.
Yeah, I just let them go. I just make core, like some like a trigger for the old devices. Even like a Japan pavilions, I didn't compose everything. I just making a situation they kind of play something coincidentally or something. So that is unstable, right? It's not like not my under the control. So, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Just to say that I appreciated that so much, this instability, and the subtleties and nuances, and I, as an artist, I appreciate that, and I guess from my own practice, I also kind of use that. It's the kind of subtleties in your accent, the way you speak, language, which is also a form of music. To pay attention to the in-between, to read in between the lines of the words and meaning, the sound of it all. I think that's kind of like a part of my aesthetic that I'm trying to develop more, and I really appreciated being in the pavilion to be able to kind of like, use the act of listening, not just seeing, but use the act of listening as a way to guide the way you're seeing the world. This is something I really appreciated, and I try to do in my own work as well.
Ming, maybe just before we go to questions from the audience, could you also talk a bit about how you've worked with camp and drag over the course of your practice, which is not just a sort of a Western notion of camp and drag, but also goes back to Chinese traditions of single-sex theater.
Yeah, that's kind of complicated. Because I'm a code switcher, right? I'll like, okay, who am I talking to? Where am I today? And then I have to kind of, this is what I do on a daily basis. And so for me, camp and kitsch, for example, they mean very different things from different perspectives. Of course, I read about camp, I study camp. I even have a persona called Susan Wong Tag, after Susan Sontag, right, who had notes on camp. And so I have that part of me, like, okay, this is what it is. But when you translate that to, let's say, when I'm in Hong Kong, for example, the idea of decor and decorations and over-decoration, it's part of the aesthetic. It's not seen as kitsch or camp. And so to be able to kind of differentiate this is where I stand. Like, how do you kind of like introduce these subtleties of aesthetic decisions? I don't have an answer for this. It's again it's about nuances. It's a dance between the two, and depending on who you're talking to, you just try to open up. You try to unstabilize. You try to unstabilize one's fixed viewpoint on a certain a way of looking, for example, whether it's through sound, whether it's through what you know about over-the-top performance. I guess that's my task.
Yeah, I think both of you are really great at sort of popping things out from the frames that we fit them into in our daily lives and in our daily cognition, and sort of making them look foreign and look new, and in doing so also giving us new possibilities for navigating, the worlds that we live in. I think we can open up the floor to questions from the audience or comments. If there's anybody wants to join in the discussion.
It's like a test.
Yeah.
Early morning test.
Yeah. You could ask them anything. Yes, over there.
Yeah, thanks very much for this amazing conversation and exchange. One thing that goes to my mind is a bit art and maybe the influence on the current from environment, political crisis that we in a sense face. And I think you basically both talk about maybe with creating instability or taking it out of the frame. And I think you do it in a very, I don't know, kind of on one hand, very playful, humoristic way, but on a very, very serious topics. And I just wondered if you see even more possibility how art or your practice can maybe help us overcome some of this crazy stuff that's going on in the world.
From my perspective, I totally agree that, how do we deal with all these kind of like complexities that are happening out there in the world today. And as an artist, I have found recently that that words sometimes fail to kind of convey the actual meanings, and it's always being taken from you and used against you or misinterpreted. But then I look at the nuances. I look at actually sound and music. Sound, for me, in the recent years, has kind of taken on a stronger presence as a tool, where you sometimes have to switch your way of listening, how you have to move from one sonic regime to another sonic regime and be in between, to kind of have a new way of listening. I think this, for me, was a revelation when I'm working with sound, that you can do things and express things which you can't with just language itself. And I think for me, that's one way of dealing with the complexities.
Yeah, I also agree, and also this question reminds me, the strugglings. We encountered many struggling difficulties so far, but on the other hand, I always talk about that type of the crisis or social issue is kind of makes us a trigger. It can be the trigger to make something. For example, during COVID time, like since 2020 till 2023, so we couldn't do some like a regular life. But that environment actually makes me a lot of production. I don't know, it's like I had no idea about what the way to expression. But I did many like a try and error because in my studio. So I kind of moved by that issue. My installation using the water, I kind of put trigger. It's actually leaky spot. It's like a leak happened to me. And then so in that time, we could find some like a forbidden creativity, which is actually inside of the body. It's not actually, it's beyond the thinking to react, how to do it. Of course, it's included like some failure, but we can try again. And then so in my practice, it's a very much talking about how to develop in a small way. I think we can do something big step, but maybe try something a little like a development front of the crisis. For me, it's like currently it's really interested about the water, the crisis happen over the world. Not only the water, but I try to do something with this.
Yeah.
And if I might just add one last thing also, the idea of crisis coming together, this is also nothing new in terms of the histories in Asia, Southeast Asia, as a migrant. You know, these are, and through the research, through in my work, it's, you know, like relationships between China and Japan, for example, Southeast Asia and the rest of the world. It's not something new, and part of the work that I do is kind of the researching how this has been addressed in the past through art, through culture. I think that's also one of my tasks.
Right. In the front.
Hello. I don't know that much about either of your practices, but I did see the Venice Biennale, Yuko's installation there, and I wrote about it as a journalist. So I was thinking at first that I didn't have a question, but then I was thinking about Eric Hatton's installation here as part of Parcours, Still Leben, A Quiet Life, which is behind the church near Klaraplatz. And it made me think that there's some kind of relationship there between what Yuko does and what he's doing with found objects, particularly found objects that come from Basel. And your objects came from Venice, which when I walked down the streets of Venice and saw like a boat selling fruit, I thought maybe that's where you had bought your fruits or vegetables. So for Yuko, I'd like to know if you'd seen his piece and how you feel. Oh, you haven't seen his piece.
I just saw it yesterday.
The second part that relates to Ming and to you as well is when I was watching him perform this piece, it made me think of the movie, the Wim Wenders movie, Perfect Days. And when I saw that movie, I was moved by the fact of this man who found joy in simple pleasures, right? Which is what I saw when I watched Eric Hatton move these objects around. He was enjoying a simple pleasure of working with found things. So since Ming works with film, I wonder how that film relates to what you do and how you think about it. And also for Yuko then, how your work relates to this man in Perfect Days and this life that he lived observing things in a quite beautiful way.
I love that movie very much. And also I live in that neighborhood, my studio located Asakusa. It's like you could find the Maya environment. It's like, it's not fancy area, not Roppongi. I kind of based in east side of Tokyo. Always I kind of choose the east side because there are many historical background, also many temples, also tiny shops, also like many dirty bar, something like this. And then so I really like to the daily life to every day finding something like a little treasure. And then I really love that kind of the life. I love that cinema very much.
I mean,
it's like my life.
I mean, I love Wim Wenders, and I identify with also his love for Japanese cinema, for example. And in my work, I do look at world cinema and looking for the everyday, the simple pleasures. And some of these films that I research are really not accessible or understand or not subtitled. I watch it through the eyes of people who know the films from that particular cultural context. And they tell me, this is an iconic moment. This is an iconic joke we use it in everyday conversation. This is an iconic action that they do in the movies, which we do as children. You know, this is the part of the everyday, which like I wouldn't have noticed because I didn't grow up with that. But I collect these moments and I try to do something and reinterpret it and offer it back to that particular community, but also try and find resonance to the universal. And so that's how I relate to it. The simple pleasures in how cinema affects your cultural consciousness.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for today. So I'd like to thank Yuko and Ming for your wonderful insights and observations on your own practices as well as on sort of broader practices, which you very generously shared with us. Thank you to everyone for joining us for this conversation. And I'll just note that Art Week Tokyo kicks off this year on November 5 and 6 with 2 days of VIP previews, and then runs from November 7 to 10 with public days. And we've got a great lineup of exhibitions and different events in store for you. So we would really love to welcome you to Tokyo if you're able to make it over. Thank you again for your attendance. Thank you.